Does anybody know what's next? That's the question that we're asking. Does anybody know what's next? Fighting lies, avoiding mass media, and speaking the truth. That's what I want to do next for me. What's next for all of us? Are you curious about that? I am. And it says somewhere in the Bible that, no man knows what tomorrow holds. And I believe that's very true. I mean, a lot of times we think we know what's going to happen, or we try to predict what's going to happen, and things like that. And even to where a lot of Christians some have said, oh, we know when Jesus is going to return, and set dates and things like that, even though to me it's pretty clear in the Bible that no one knows that. So in a way, we don't know what's next. We certainly don't know what's next. We know it's been a wild ride this year, but we don't know what's next. However, it seems to me that through this whole thing, that the powers that shouldn't be, who are planning and funding this and profiting heavily from it. And if you know any billionaires, those are probably the folks that are profiting the most, are the billionaires, from what I have read. So, but if you know some of these folks, I don't think I know any personally, but if you do, and you listen to them, you can find out what's next. Because I've found that through this whole thing, when it started on the Ides of March, that this whole thing has been pretty much scripted and gone according to script. And I've been listening to and the rhetoric of a certain billionaire, and he and his wife have invested heavily in vaccines. So I've been listening to what he's been saying, and I've noticed that what he's been saying is eventually said a few weeks later by a certain head of infectious diseases who seems to know everything. I wonder when the last time he saw a patient was, and people seem to worship him. Of course, now that I've said that, some people have theorized that there are actual AI devices. Artificial intelligence is actually listening to a lot of stuff that we say and reading our posts and that kind of thing, and then changing the script, that this may all be driven by artificial intelligence, by computers. The whole narrative may be. And who knows? Those are just things that I'm throwing out there that I've heard that make a good deal of sense to me. And I like to find out about all kinds of arguments and all sides of things, because I like to know all of the arguments. And people these days, even the people who are supposed to be asking the questions, we've sort of given our journalistic and question asking abilities over to journalists in these past few decades. And we've expected them to ask some questions, and some of them have, as some of them used to, but not many of them are doing it these days. So it seems. So for looking at what's next, one channel you might want to look at, if it's still up, I hope it is the Ice Age Farmer. He talks a lot about the coming food shortages and says a lot of things about food and the food supply chain that I don't hear anywhere else. And I would like to, he brings up actual news stories and discusses them. So I learn a lot from him. Of course, I hope he's wrong, but what if he's not? Also, we can look at the paper for predictive programming. As some of you might remember, this was almost a month ago now, about 3 weeks ago, we got an Albuquerque Journal. And an interesting thing, and I went over part of this headline in another video, or part of the story, but there was a headline that said, University of New Mexico dean named Secretary of New Mexico Department of Health. Now, I know that some people have measured and found that last fall and winter before February, the end of February, really, a lot, or I think it was a record number of CEOs of companies just stepped down. And the question is, why were they stepping down? And some people have theorized that they were stepping down because, they could get all their stocks and all that stuff and get all their money and then be away when the dominoes started falling for this particular psychological operation. And I think that's quite plausible. I don't know if it's the truth or not, but I think it is certainly quite plausible to look into as a, to see what evidence there is of this and what happened and how much people profited. We know that there have been a lot of billionaires profiting from this crisis. Okay, so here is, and I mention the CEOs because I've noticed also, just on a personal level, and it might just be because it's in the news more, but a lot of health department people from local, sometimes county health directors and sometimes state health directors have stepped down. And I'm curious about that. I'm very curious about that because they're making a lot of illegal mandates and acting as though they're making law and strong-arming people into contact tracing. I've personally experienced that. They're trying to do that anyway, and telling people they have to wear masks and all this. And a lot of them are stepping down for whatever reason. And I'm curious about this too. So here's one in New Mexico that the person stepped down. And this person, I think in September is when it just says this fall, the former Department of Health secretary. But I'm going to read a little bit about it. Now, remember, she also comes from academia. She comes from the University of New Mexico. And as we all know, universities don't have any bias, right? That's where you go to, find university one truth. The idea is that you go there and you study a whole bunch of stuff, and then through that you come up with the one truth of whatever. I think that was the idea when they were created. And I don't know if that was coming up with your own truth or if there was only one truth that they meant. I'm not sure how that was. That was, I believe, a few centuries ago that they came up with that name. And so I'm curious as to, what the story is behind that. And I don't know it, but I do know that if these people were searching for the truth, that there wouldn't be so many professors and others who work for universities that are okay with putting a lot of students and a whole lot of athletes under house arrest because they test positive for a test that has, in some studies, a high false positive rate, in some studies, a high false negative rate. I did read the study back in April, now withdrawn, curiously, that had a high false positive rate, a false positive rate of over 50%. And true to course, as I was saying, a lot of times we know what's coming next, or we know what has happened because the powers that shouldn't be say what has happened. And the other day, Fauci said something, talked about the cycles of the test, cycles of amplification of the test. And that's how, I'm not going to go into detail right now, but basically, if it's over a certain number, 35 cycles, there's a higher rate of false positive. And the FDA recommends that the tests go up to 40 cycles. And to my knowledge, there's also no standardized setting, 34 cycles or 33 or something. There's nothing standard across labs. So it might depend also on which lab it's sent to. So there's a lot of room for error with these tests that are coming up with these cases that are providing the case surges, okay? But nobody in academia seems to be understanding that or getting it, which is amazing to me, because you have a lot of people who are in science, you know, so it looks like they should figure this out. But for some reason, I can't explain it. It seems real easy when you start looking for it. So, but we know that these universities, you know, they have obviously have a lot of people there who aren't asking a lot of questions. And that's the place that you were supposed to go to ask a lot of questions. So anyway, that's where this woman, the Department of Health woman, is coming from in New Mexico. New Mexico has never needed experienced and compassionate public health leadership more than right now, the governor said in a statement Wednesday. The governors are really getting a lot of power with this. If you're a governor, most of them seem to be on a huge power kick, and why shouldn't they be? Dr. Collins will hit the ground running as part of our state's COVID-19 response effort with the Department of Health and indeed all of state government. Collins, and that's the name of the person who was nominated or is going to fill the position, who has guided COVID-19 testing and contact tracing efforts as part of her current University of New Mexico job, will take over the Department of Health post at a time of record high virus cases. And we know what causes that: a highly unreliable test that can be manipulated to provide a lot of false positives. And that's according to science. So when you follow the science, that's what happens. Record high cases, hospitalizations, and deaths across New Mexico. At least that's what the propaganda says. And I think they have really hit a lot of the Native American population hard with this because of they closed down Gallup. It's one of my favorite cities. They closed it down early on in this whole thing. Now, what was really making those people sick? That's what I want to know. Okay, so the important thing that I'm reading today with these two paragraphs that I've read is the idea that she has guided COVID-19 testing. Remember, that's how the cases and the case surges happen, is by testing, by a test that can be highly manipulated. Okay, when you take a pregnancy test, 99% accuracy. Okay, so pretty good accuracy for a test. Not so with this one. Okay, not so at all. And yet people are lining up to get it for no good reason, except that there are people like this. And she's in positions in the health department positions, and they are getting money. As we found out from LA County, I posted something the other day about that. LA County has gotten a tremendous amount of money from the CARES Act, and they're doing a lot of promotion and propaganda of this whole COVID-19, which is really the largest wealth transfer from us, regular people, to the upper classes, and I mean the billionaires. Okay, they're making a killing during this. Okay, so what's next? More testing, more contact tracing. That's what is planned according to this article. Sometimes you can tell by the articles. So those are some things to look for. Food shortages, might want to prepare for those. Food shortages, contact tracing. What's going to happen when you want to go into a grocery store and the grocery store says, well, we can't really let you in until you give us your phone number in case anybody in here becomes a case. You know what that means? In case anybody in here not gets sick, in case anybody in here tests positive for COVID-19. And it's interesting that this woman, okay, she took, I think she took, this is Will Lead, Yeah, I think she's already taken the reins. This is from the middle of November. And just the other day, guess what New Mexico is doing? They were shutting down grocery stores. So was the other health director in New Mexico not that great and not that willing to go along with the game? And this woman was? I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that just in the past week or so, they've been shutting down grocery stores. I think if one person tests positive, or, and remember, testing positive is easy. It's not even random. It's not even like, when I first started researching this, I thought this test is like, random, like throwing a coin, but it's not. It can be manipulated. And if you know what you're doing, within your lab, you can manipulate a lot of false positives. That's probably why some of labs in Florida had like all positives or something like that. Okay. Now, why is no one asking these questions? Well, I'm not sure. I wish people would, but and I wish reporters would, but they don't seem to be doing that, unfortunately. So that's what seems to be next on the agenda. Now, on the big agendas that are being fulfilled, like the agenda 2030, if you want to look that up. I think there might be an agenda 2050 by the United Nations. That will tell you, and of course, the Rockefeller Foundation has a lot of documents saying what's going to come. They've scripted this thing out on page 18 of a document that was written in 2010 about a lockstep scenario. You can look that up. And you can find the scenario that we're going through right now, down to even closing businesses and that kind of thing. It was written a long time ago, well, 10 years ago. So what does that, what does that tell you? Well, they seem to be following a script. And maybe it's a script that keeps constantly changing because of artificial intelligence. So maybe it looks like we're following governors, but maybe we're actually following a computer who's making these decisions according to algorithms, according to what we say and do on the internet, which there's a lot more happening on the internet now because so many things have been closed in person. And I got a bulletin from a church, that's all I'm going to say right now. And it said currently suspended on Sunday school and currently suspended on Wednesday night prayer meeting service. This is so sad to me. It's like everything for the soul, everything heavenly has been suspended. Oh, don't sing. Just sing in your heart. That's not what the Bible says. And these preachers are not obeying the Bible. They're not. They're obeying the government. They might be obeying the artificial intelligence that may be running this thing. Okay, but they're not obeying God. We have to stop. We have to stop wearing masks. We have to understand what's happening with the testing and why that I can see 200 headlines about cases surging. And I'll get mad. I'll get mad that there are 200 newspapers who will carry that without explaining what that means. Or curfews without explaining how that has anything to do with a virus and its spread. Okay. When I've been sick in the past, and if I've gone out to the grocery store or something, it didn't really matter if I went out at 3 a.m. or if I went out in the middle of the day. I was sick. It didn't, and I'm not even sure that the whole virus theory of contagion is as it's been sold to us. I'm looking into a lot of different arguments right now, and you should be too, because now is a good time while everything is so in such chaos and disheveled. Now is a good time to pray for the truth and seek the truth, and really, go places where you feel uncomfortable, and let go of these people who have such a weak argument that they won't listen to an argument that it might be new or might make them a little uncomfortable, or they won't listen to information that might make them a little uncomfortable. That's sad. We need to pray for them, and we need to let them go. And we need to let go of these churches that aren't obeying the Bible. We need to let go of them too. Okay? It's a time of letting go. And the energy, I find it interesting because, energy kind of comes in and there's different stuff. I feel sometimes a lot of energy coming in, and not everybody feels the energy that I do. And there's a lot of energy right now for us to be able to, a year ago, most of us wouldn't have gone on some kind of search for the truth. And now some of us are really, hey, we want to find out the truth. And we've got a little more time to do it. So that's what's happening on earth. But here's the problem: the government and those above the government, the planners and funders of this crisis, the people who are profiting from it, they will often try to do things that mimic the energy of the earth, so that when we might have a lot of other stuff coming in that we really need to, focus on. Oops, here's rioting and looting again. That came in at an interesting time last summer, right after Newsom was saying, oh no, I don't go to Montana on the weekends after I make all these edicts. I don't go to Montana and then escape them, right? And we know that's true because it was in the LA Times. And we know that the pharmaceutical billionaire-owned LA Times is always, always, always honest. They never lie about anything, and they never try to make somebody look bad because, Gary Webb, like they didn't have 17 or 18 reporters trying to make him look bad when he was investigating places he wasn't supposed to back in the 90s. They are above reproach. So we know if it's in the LA Times that it is perfectly unbiased, grammatically correct, and completely honest, right? Okay, now that we got that straight, let's read a little Charles Bukowski. Turn the right side up. An unusual place. Just thinking about writing this poem has already almost made me sick, but I'll try it one more time. It was in Salt Lake City, and I had the flu, and it was cold, and I was in my shirt sleeves. I had given my reading and was ready to fly back to LA, but I was with two girls who wanted to make the bars, and we went into this one place, and the girls wanted to sit near the front. There was a boy on the stage, a Japanese cowboy, and he could holler. Gets a little raunchy after this. Not a lot, just a little. I had to make the men's room, and I ran in there, and the urinal was large, like a large, shallow bathtub. The urinal was like a large, shallow bathtub, and it was clogged and full of urine, gently spilling across the floor. The entire floor was wet, and I almost puked into that flowing tide of piss. I came out and got the girls out of there. That time I didn't tip for their table service. I'm still not sure which was worse, the men's room or that Japanese cowboy. That's Mormon territory, and clearly there's work to be done. An Unusual Place by Charles Bukowski. I'm going to read. I kind of added a word accidentally, so I'm going to read part of that again. I came out and got the girls out of there. That time I didn't tip for table service. I'm still not sure which was worse, the men's room or that Japanese cowboy. That's Mormon territory, and clearly there's work to be done. It's better. That's better. Sorry, Charles Bukowski. I love your poetry, and I'm sorry when I mess it up. Okay, so what's for the future? Well, we don't really know, but we do know what the plans are, and we can look up the scenarios online. Isn't that crazy? Do you feel like you're living in a movie? I do. but we got to let some people go. We got to let some institutions go. I got a library newsletter today, and it was so sad. I think I've mentioned the Burbank Library saga. I got a one from here in Pueblo, and of course, even for the little kids, story hour, they're requiring the adults to wear suffocation devices. It's so sad. We've got to stop. We've got to say no to this stuff, and we've got to let people know that it is not okay. It is not okay. We've got to let people know how the PCR process works. It's really more of a process than a test, and it was designed to be that way, and it is easy to manipulate. If we let people know that, then these cases surge thing, like I said earlier that I could read 200 headlines about cases surging. I would get mad, but I wouldn't be worried because I know what that means with cases surging. Now they've added hospitalizations, deaths, but how much of that is really true? We don't know. We don't know. We need more film your hospital people. And we need to know, I don't see people standing in lines outside hospitals, but I don't go by them very often either. And we can look at the death rate too and see how that goes. I know there was a study, or there was an article that did that, and there's a lot of controversy about that. Because it was about the same death rate as it has been. Maybe fewer people dying this year than a couple or 3 years ago, but I don't know. There's just a lot of information out there, so we need to pray for the truth. We need to really make sure our hearts need to be right with God. I'm not giving any kind of spiritual or physical advice, but I think it's a good idea to do that. And I think also that it's a good idea to leave these churches that aren't following the Bible. If you're a church-going person, you need to be going to a church. Liberty Fellowship seems to be following the Bible. In Montana, we listen to their live stream try to listen every week. And there are other churches that are preaching. If preachers were doing their job, none of this stuff would have happened. But they're not, and we have to live with that. And we can, and we don't really know what's next, but we know what's planned for next. So take a look at the Ice Age farmer. Don't allow contact tracing. Don't allow testing, and stop wearing masks. Okay, we can do this. And you're probably feeling very alone. You might be, might not be. But there are a lot of people who feel very frustrated right now. So if you feel very frustrated, you're not alone. Okay? I hope you have a wonderful day.